Hello, welcome. I hope you're doing well. So, as you can tell from the title, this is a reading vlog-y thing. It's been a while since my last one, which was for All the Light We Cannot See. I really enjoyed making that reading vlog. It's probably my favorite video that I've made until this point, so I wanted to make another reading vlog. So the original intro that I made for this video is gone, and I have to redo it, hence the kind of impromptu background. But basically, I ended up picking not just one but 3 books to read for this one, and as you can tell from the title, it kind of ended up being themed. The original book that I was planning on reading was Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is one of those books that I really wanted to read before the end of last year and never got around to. So I've been working my way through the remains of that list now in January, but it's quite short, and so I didn't think it warranted its entirely own reading vlog, so I decided to theme it. So this is originally a Japanese novel. I have another Japanese book on my shelf, but because things come in threes, I decided to switch it up a little, and I decided to pick up 2 more books for this one, not only from different countries, but also from different continents. So the second book I picked up was The Devil And Miss Prym by Paulo Coelho. This one has been on my shelf for a far too long time, and I really have to get to it, so perfect excuse to finally pick this one up now. Paulo Coelho is Brazilian, and so this was originally published in Portuguese, I believe. And the last book that I picked up is one you don't know I own, but that will feature in an upcoming haul video. I acquired some books in Black November, and I accumulated some more books over Christmas, and this was one of these accumulated books, One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn. This is then originally a Russian novel. They're all from different countries, different continents, and I'll be reading them all in their English translations. I think that's all the intro you need, really, so let's just get straight to it. So, I just finished The Lovers, the first story in this book, and it was really good. I really enjoyed it, and I have a feeling I'm really going to like this one in general. I thought it was really good. It has a nice message of don't leave things unsaid, trust your gut, that kind of thing. I really liked it. I thought it was really neat. So that first story was a really good start, and I'm really excited about reading the rest. I always had a feeling I would really enjoy this in general, and I'm pretty sure that I will. It's off to a great start anyway.
So, update. I'm actually reading One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich now. I finished Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and I never, talked about my thoughts about it. But basically, I really enjoyed this. I thought this was really, really good. I enjoyed all of the stories. I didn't realize that they would be, obviously I realized that they were connected by the cafe, but I didn't think that they would be so smoothly connected. This is basically just one long story divided into 4 parts, if that makes sense. And I really liked that. It made the whole reading experience really smooth. This got really emotional. I knew it would be, or I assumed it would be, but it got a lot more emotional than I thought it would. And that's a really good sign, I think. Even though it's a short story, it managed to kind of pack an emotional punch. I really liked the characters. All of the stories being so connected made it easy to get to know the characters in such a short story. The fact that there are reoccurring characters that tie the stories together and that all the stories kind of surround them, I think that was really neatly done. Definitely helped with the emotional aspects of the story, because although there are short stories and the book itself is quite short, you still get to know the characters and you feel for them. And I loved that the rules for the time traveling were so clear, so many and so strict. I really enjoyed that aspect too. So all in all, I really liked this book, and I kind of really want to pick up more of the books in the series. I think I might. We'll see. Anyway, I'm currently reading One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, and I'm not that far in, but I already know going into this that this is not going to be a fun story. So we'll see how this goes. So this book is one of those that I'm definitely going to be thinking about for a while now that I've finished it, because those final lines in this book were just quick thoughts off of the top of my head now that I've finished it. This is a small book in every way. It's 144 pages. It's not even standard paperback size. It follows the life of this man for one day. But man, does it feel like a day. I felt like I was really along for a whole day, and it was long and exhausting. I'm exhausted now that I've finished this. And those final lines, because you're constantly aware that this is just a single day, but you don't reflect over it until those last lines, and you realize you as a reader can close this book and walk away from the story now, but this man is doing this exact same day over and over and over and over and over, and it's just really well written. It really pulls you in, and you're exhausted by the end of it, as if you were the one who's been in the story. And then just to underline the fact that you are not the one in the story, those last lines just drive it home, and you're just sitting there oh my god, these poor souls. And the worst part is as the reader, I was quite angry for our main character. This life is so normalized. He doesn't really think further than a day ahead. He's been a prisoner for so long now, and so those around him, that it's just so normalized. And I was so throughout the book, why are you not angry at this? Why are you not angrier? When it's just something that he kind of he goes with the flow. And I'm sure he was angry in the beginning, but after 8 years, he was even accepting the fact that he'd probably stay there even longer than his designated sentence, because that's just something that happens. And he just accepted that news yeah, that's probably just, it is what it is kind of situation. And I'm What? This was written really well. I was completely absorbed and I was exhausted by the end of it, even though I'm just reading. But man, those final lines just really, it was a punch. Man, that felt like a punch. This was good. This was really good. So I finished it and it was really good. This was basically a 200-page philosophical discussion, but I quite enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting, really interesting. I was curious about what decisions would be made and the justifications that the characters would come up with. I thought it was so interesting. I thought it was a really cool story. Some really cool debates. A lot of back and forth. I don't know. I thought it was pretty interesting, pretty cool. I'm gonna go to bed now. It's getting quite late. And I'll wrap up all of my final thoughts about the 3 books that I've read these past couple of days tomorrow. So, hello. Finished all the books and I have a little final chat about them. So the first one that I finished was Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and the biggest thing that I really think about the most is the fact that although it's 4 like short stories, they're basically just parts in a whole bigger story. So all the 4 stories are connected far more than I thought they would be. There are reoccurring characters, so you really get a chance to get to know the people that we meet in this story. I mean, it is a pretty short book, and the stories within the story itself weren't very long, so I'm glad that they were reoccurring characters, because then throughout all 4 stories you get to know a lot of the same people, which I really liked. So like I said, this really felt like the stories were more 4 different parts of a bigger story. I really liked that element. There's a full circle moment as well regarding the first story and the characters there. I imagined it would be emotional, but after reading the first story, I didn't think it was going to be super emotional, because the first story isn't very emotionally loaded, but the next stories all are, and so it ends up being quite an emotional story, and it makes the full circle moment even better. I was assuming that the only thing that these stories would have in common was the coffee shop itself, but turns out that's not the case. So I really liked the way this story was structured, the way it was written. It was really well done. Really liked the time traveling element as well. You really get to know the coffee shop, you get to know the rules regarding time travel, which I was a huge fan of. I liked that they were so clear-cut. I liked that they were kind of annoying. I love the small little lessons that are spread throughout these stories. Don't leave anything unsaid. Don't judge people too quickly. Hear someone out before you make up your mind about them. Trust your gut. Follow your heart. That kind of thing. Small lessons that you learn throughout life anyway, but
these are nice reminders. Some really emotional stories in here with some characters that are really great and you really get to know quite well. And the time traveling element just served the purpose of underlining some really important lessons that it doesn't hurt to be reminded of every once in a while. So, all in all, a really, really nice book. Then I finished One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, and man. So you basically follow Ivan Denisovich throughout a single day in his sentence at a work camp in Siberia. I think my favorite part about this is the writing, because the writing, it's what makes it. The writing, first of all, really pulled you in. So it felt like you were hanging over Ivan Denisovich's shoulder the entire time you're reading this. And that also leads to, once you finish this, at least for me, I was exhausted when I finished reading this book. I was so tired because it really felt like a super long day, and this is 144 pages long. It's not even a standard paperback size. It's smaller, but it feels like a day. It feels like a really long day. It feels like a really exhausting day. And when you finish the book, you just kind of sigh really deeply. Another thing that I really liked was the last few sentences in this book, because the last things you read as you're about to close this book and step away from the story is that this is one day of several thousand just like it. And you as a reader sit there, you close the book, and you feel exhausted and tired from just reading about this single day, and then you feel guilty because you're able to close the book, step away from the story. But this man, who was 8 years into his sentence and has at least 2 more to go with days exactly like this. So the writing was excellent. I loved the way this was written. I loved the words that were chosen. It was a really well-written book that really served the intention that I'm sure the book was meant to have when it came out, and that I think it still has today. And then there's something about it that there's so much of what you read feels so bizarre, because obviously none of what is going on in this work camp is normal, right? It's a work camp. It's not pleasant. It's awful. The way their day is structured, all the things that are set up around them, the things that they can and can't do, the way they're treated, all of it is awful. But the book, or the way the characters go about their day, the way the characters go about everything that their day encompasses, is so pragmatic and so resigned to, like, yes, this is just the way it is, and yes, this is, oh, poor soul, he now has to do this and this, and he has to, and all he does is sigh about it, and he's like, ah, yes, I guess I have to be punished now. And it's so resigned to, yes, this is our reality, and there's nothing we can do about it. And I get it, because if that's the way you've had to live for years and years and years, and you know that there's no way of getting out of it, you make the best of it. You just go through the motions, and you don't think further ahead than a single day, because there's no point. But like, as a reader, you're sitting there and you're angry because you've just been introduced to this reality of theirs, and you have to remind yourself, this man has had this reality for every single day for 8 years at this point. There's nothing that we're seeing now for the first time that he hasn't seen, nothing that he hasn't done, nothing that he hasn't said, nothing that he hasn't tried, nothing that he hasn't thought. Maybe just one time does he consider or reflect over the injustice of his situation. One time. And the rest is just spent thinking about, oh, I have to remember to do this before someone else does it. Or I hope that we have this for dinner. He's just thinking about the most basic things, and in such a nonchalant way. And you're sitting there like, how are you not angrier? But you realize, or you have to remind yourself, that he's probably been very angry. But that was years ago, and we're just jumping straight into this accepted reality now, because there's nothing else to it. There's nothing else for it. And it's just so frustrating as a reader. But it's such a great It's such a great way to write the story, because that's the way you cause the most impact. Because if you'd taken one of the days from one of his earliest days in the camp, you would have probably met with a really angry person, someone who was furious at the injustice, someone who was so angry and annoyed and was fighting against the injustice that he'd been served. And you as a reader that's the way you would feel too, and so you and the characters are both on the same page. But jumping into 8 years into a sentence where he has accepted this reality long ago, and you as a reader are just introduced to it, you're in different places of this story. It's like, this is my first day in the camp, and this is his 2000 something. There's such a difference between the way I was seeing everything and observing everything, and the way he was seeing and observing everything. And I think, again, that's part of the point. That's part of the way that Solzhenitsyn creates the biggest impression on the reader. And so I thought it was a very well-structured story, very well written, very well done. In general, it's a very well done book. And I'm glad that I've read it. And it's a book that I'm going to be thinking about for a very long time. And then finally, I read The Devil and Miss Prym by Paulo Coelho. My first Paulo Coelho book, definitely not my last. This is like a 200-page book, and it's basically just one very long philosophical discussion. And I was so intrigued. I think this is such an interesting topic. And I loved all of the back and forth, the debates. I was very interested in seeing the characters' reactions, their thoughts, their debates among themselves, their back and forth, the decisions they arrived at, how they arrived at them, how they justified them, and eventually to see how the story would end and how the characters would feel about it. And it was just a very interesting philosophical discussion. I really liked the plot too. I liked the storyline that all of this philosophical debate sprung up from and around. I thought it was really well done. And then there's something about it, something about the writing that kind of keeps the reader, at least this was my impression, it kind of keeps the reader on the outside observing rather than forming any sort of great attachment to any of the characters or feeling particularly invested in a character. It's more like the reader is purposefully placed on the outside of the story, made to observe and kind of follow along the events as they take place. And I really liked that for this story. For this particular story and this particular plot and this particular discussion, I really liked that that was how we as a reader, or at least I as a reader, kind of took in the story. I thought it was such an interesting choice, and I wonder if more people felt that way, because that's the way that this came across to me. I really didn't grow any particular attachment to the characters at all, but I was still so invested and so interested because I wanted to know what they would do, and it kind of made me feel like I was conducting an experiment. It was a very interesting way of reading a story, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was such a good choice. If that was a purposeful choice, then I really liked that choice for the story. And if it wasn't purposeful, then I at least am very glad that that's the way that I experienced this book. I don't know, it kind of added an authentic layer to the story, if that makes sense. Because that's basically what this whole story was. It was an experiment, and I was so intrigued and so interested and invested, even though I didn't really have any sort of attachment to anyone in the story. And that doesn't happen all that often, I feel like. I don't read enough of these kinds of stories, I think. I want to read more of them for sure. So that was probably the thing that stuck with me the most when I finished the story, was the way I as a reader experienced the story. It was such an interesting experience and such a fitting experience for the story concerned, and I really enjoyed it. So that was so cool. This was a really cool book. I flew through this. I read this so fast. I think I read this book faster than either of the others. I just had such a good time with it. I thought it was done really well in all kinds of ways, and I am really looking forward now to reading more from this author. So, finished my 3 translated works of fiction from 3 authors that I've never tried before. 3 authors from 3 different continents, originally written in 3 different languages, and I really enjoyed my reading experience with all of them, so this has been really successful. As always, if you have thoughts or opinions on any of the books that I've mentioned, or for that matter, any of the authors, or any of the authors' other books, then please do share them in the comments. As always, that's where I'll see you, but I'm actually really interested in knowing if you guys have read any of these books, what you thought of them. Because I had a great time. And these are the only books that I've read from these authors. So are these books representative of their work or no? And since I enjoyed these, what would you recommend? If you do have any thoughts or opinions at all, then please do share them in the comments as always. But that's all for me today. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've had a really nice day. I hope you have a really nice week. And I hope that the book you're reading is a really good one. Bye.